We just got our first submission to story time. It is titled My Possible Bigfoot Story. It was sent in from an anonymous writer. It starts out with a note to the reader. This is a true experience I had, and I have written my account to the best of my recollection of the night in question.
If I may, this guy can write really well, actually.
Actually, yeah. It was late September of 1998. At the time, I was living and working in Seattle, Washington, and was yearning to get out of the city for a few days to unplug, ride ATVs, and just enjoy nature. My mom and stepdad have a cabin located in the Umatilla National Forest, which is part of the Blue Mountains of eastern Washington and northeastern Oregon. They purchased the cabin in 1994, and ever since I have gone up to stay for days at a time. I still go up there to this day. When I was a kid, I used to elk and deer hunt in those mountains starting when I was about 12, up until I moved to Seattle. At the time, I was playing in rock bands and decided to invite one of my band members up with me. We'll just call her Jennifer. She's pretty much a city person and was excited to see the cabin and curious what riding ATVs was all about. This was going to have to be a short trip, so we both took Friday off to drive up to the cabin. After all, it was a 6.5-hour drive from Seattle. That would leave us all day Saturday to ride ATVs and enjoy the mountains, and then we would return on Sunday. Saturday came and I taught Jennifer how to ride an ATV that morning, and off we went exploring the surrounding woods. We were pretty much out riding from 10 a.m. until dusk. Jennifer had a blast, and I was glad she enjoyed the adventure. Saturday evening, we'd barbecue some huge rib steaks. Right?
Now I'm hungry.
And spent our time having some beers on the front porch and enjoying listening to the elk bugling in the distance. When night came, we continued sitting on the front porch, marveling at the silence that the woods provided. The cabin has 2 bedrooms on the main floor and 2 bedrooms in the loft. I let Jennifer have the master bedroom on the main floor, and I took the adjacent guest bedroom. Jennifer decided to go to bed around 11 p.m. I chose to take a shower before I called it a night. As best I can recall, I went to bed around midnight and I went out like a light. At around 2 a.m., commotion outside the shop, adjacent to the room I was sleeping in, woke me up. I started to hear strange sounds like rocks or heavy pieces of wood being banged together. I couldn't quite make out which it was. At first, I thought that maybe the herd of cattle that we'd encountered earlier that day on ATVs may be roaming through the cabin area. I didn't think much of it, and I rolled over in bed. The commotion continued for some time, and I was having trouble getting back to sleep. Then, something occurred right outside the window of my room. I suddenly heard something take a deep exhale and then let out a low, guttural growling sound.
I wouldn't be able to go back to sleep that entire night.
Probably not. It was literally right outside the window. The hairs on my neck instantly stood up, and I quickly sat up in bed and my heart pounding. I had never heard a sound like that before, and suddenly had the impression something was trying to look in the window. Fortunately, or unfortunately, depending on how you view the situation, the curtains were closed. I continued sitting up and listening, and once again heard a heavy exhale right outside the window. At this point, I was trying to decide if maybe there was a bear outside, but this didn't make much sense to me, because I continued to hear the knocking sounds going on out near the shop. Then, things got even stranger. As I continued to sit up in bed listening and trying to decide what I should do, I started to feel a heavy vibration outside the cabin. The cabin foundation is situated on a very hard clay-like soil. I immediately got the impression that something very heavy was moving around the cabin. At this point, I had to investigate, not only for Jennifer and my safety, but my curiosity. I didn't want to investigate because, in all honesty, by this point I was spooked beyond belief. I remembered I had brought up my .30-06 hunting rifle, mainly for protection, and I decided in the pitch black night, there was no moon outside. I decided to grab my gun. I loaded it and went out into the hallway to investigate.
Yeah, I wouldn't do that.
Why not?
A little guttural growl outside your window?
Yeah, and the knocking and, stones on the cabin.
I ain't got the guts to do that.
This was
scared of some lights off in my room.
Your lights are always off.
No, in my room. I don't care. It's scary.
Even though you can't see anything, you still don't like the lights off in your room? No. All right. This probably wasn't the smartest thing I could have done, but I managed to load the rifle in the pitch black and slowly got up and put my clothes on. All the while, the commotion and the soil vibration were happening outside the cabin. I grabbed the rifle and slowly opened the door. I walked into the hallway, which led to the main living room and the kitchen. The main area has 3 large windows, so I thought, whatever it was, maybe I could see movement of a shadow or shadows. I slowly snuck into the main area and stood there looking at the windows. I couldn't see a thing. It was so dark out. With my heart pounding, I finally decided to go to the front door. I quickly turned on the porch light and stepped outside.
I wouldn't do that.
Once I did this, with the gun loaded and the safety off, it was dead silent outside. I stood on the porch for a brief minute, and all I could hear was the faint whisper of the wind. I decided that maybe this, possibly, is a figment of my imagination. So I went back inside, unloaded the rifle, and crawled back into bed. About 10 minutes later, the knocking sounds out by the shop started up again, and the feeling of something very heavy moving around the cabin started up again. Now I realize that this was not a figment of my imagination, and something really was happening outside. I once again loaded the rifle, put my clothes on, and walked out to the main area of the cabin, not turning the lights on to see if I can see something moving. Again, it was just plain too dark. I again stepped out on the front porch, turned the light on, and this time stood outside for 5 or so minutes to see if anything was there. Absolute silence was all I got in return. I once again went back into the cabin. This time, I looked at the clock, and it was 2:45 a.m. I again unloaded the rifle, took my clothes off, and crawled back into bed. At this point, I was very puzzled, and the fear I had before started to wane, as I thought that whatever it was, it probably could have taken me when I was out on the porch. Again, about 10 minutes later, the commotion out by the shop, the feeling of something moving around the cabin started up again. I again got up, loaded the rifle, put my clothes on, and walked out into the main area of the cabin. This time, I grabbed a flashlight and again turned the porch light on and stepped outside. Only this time, I walked out into the driveway, the cabin, and turned the flashlight on. I started moving the flashlight around in the woods towards the shop area of the cabin and the surrounding areas. I was mainly hoping to see some sort of eyes shining with the flashlight. Unfortunately, I couldn't see any, and was disappointed. I ultimately crawled back into bed again after unloading the rifle. Then, the commotion out by the shop and the feeling of movement around the cabin started up again. By this point, I had the impression that whatever it was outside was playing with me. This time, I stayed in bed. I had had enough. I continued to try and sleep, but got none as the commotion went on right up until sunup. When it finally stopped, I had gotten maybe an hour of sleep. That morning, I got up and made a very strong pot of coffee and proceeded to walk outside around the cabin grounds, hoping to find some sort of evidence that may have clued me in on what exactly it was outside the night before. The ground was so hard that I couldn't find any type of prints or evidence that something was there. I was severely disappointed. When Jennifer finally got up, I asked her how she slept. Her reply was, "I didn't sleep well at all. I was hearing strange things outside, and I heard you get up a few times. I don't really want to talk about it." The rest of the morning was spent cleaning the cabin, and we left around noon. It was a long drive back to Seattle for me due to my lack of sleep from the night before. I had never experienced anything like this up in the mountains before or since this happened. Only in the last 3 years did I finally brave staying up at the cabin by myself. The reason why, I wonder, it was possibly Bigfoot, is because there have been sightings in this area over the years. If one goes up to the store at Tollgate, which is about 10 miles up the mountain from the cabin, there are plaster casts hanging on the wall of big footprints found over the years, with one taken by Grover Krantz, a renowned cryptozoologist and Bigfoot investigator. To that end, I welcome any other alternative explanation that may be logical. Thank you to our anonymous writer. You have any questions or you want to talk about it?
No, not really.
You don't want to discuss the story? Do you think it was real?
Sounds convincing enough to me. I mean, what else? What would he have to gain?
Right.
Lie.
Why do you think he sent it in anonymously?
Probably so that there wasn't a whole bunch of, Bigfoot investigators, researchers up there, and making their quiet little place of refuge into, like, a zoo of people coming in. So, that's my thoughts on that.
What was your favorite part of the story?
When he got back into bed.
When he got back into bed, which time?
The last time, I wouldn't go out there in the dark.
You wouldn't?
Not unless there was someone behind me.
So, I have to bring this up because you're totally blind.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always dark.
Mm-hmm.
And you go outside all the time.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference?
I can't see something creeping up on me.
What if you were to hear something out there? Would you immediately think Bigfoot?
Well, I mean, it could have scared me, and yes, I did think it was a Bigfoot at first, but I don't want to talk about that.
Oh, okay. I think we should start this whole thing over again.
No, I think we did good.
You think we did good?
We should cut this part out, though.
Yeah, we can't.
Yeah, we can.
I don't know how to edit. So
Yeah, you did.
They get the raw version.
No.
So anyway, this is where Jade wants to do story time from time to time. So if you have a submission, if you have a story out in the wilderness that you would like to send Jade and have me read to him.
One like the one you just heard, or, I don't know, just a
story
interesting one.
Yeah, interesting story of survival, something scary, or just anything.
Really anything, yeah.
Just really anything. Where do we send it?
The Moment of Impact 6/22 @gmail.com.
Yeah, but I think it's just the email is Moment of Impact 622. So MOMENTOFIMPACT 622 @gmail.com.
Or you can find it in the link in the description below.
Right.
That one would have been easier to say.
That would have been.
Alright.
Okay.
Well, I hope you guys enjoy our little banter back and forth. Alright, catch you in the next one. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this.